You know, I almost called this episode of The Weekly Strange Dumbass of the Week because the clown you'll meet today did something really stupid by visiting one of the most dangerous and unspoiled strange places on Earth with a can of Diet Coke. Stay tuned for all the weirdness and dumbassery that will have you saying, "Of course an American did that." Let's get into The Weekly Strange. Good evening and welcome to The Weekly Strange. I'm your host, Jon F. Merz, author, actor, adventurer. Now, before we begin tonight, I'd like to ask you to please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our uploads when they occur. All right. Now, before we begin, I think it's generally understood that Americans, by and large, tend to do a whole lot of stupid things that make the rest of the world shake their collective heads. And this isn't me bashing the country. These are just facts. Yes, stupid people are everywhere. I know that. But for some reason, we seem to have more than our fair share of them. And as a veteran and someone who served this country, I feel like I've earned that right to be able to say it. Okay? Patriotism means calling your country out when it does something stupid. Okay, with that out of the way, our episode today takes us to the Indian Ocean, to one of the most dangerous places on the planet, North Sentinel Island. Home to the Sentinelese people, you may have heard about them before, as a tribe of islanders that have remained cut off from the rest of civilization for, well, basically forever. In the times when outside people have attempted to make contact, they've either been killed, run off, or in the case of low-flying helicopters, had arrows shot at it and spears thrown at it. Not exactly the most hospitable and welcoming folks by any stretch of the imagination. And really, if you have more than a few brain cells to rub together, it should be obvious that they don't take kindly to strangers violating their lands. Right? I mean, seriously. North Sentinel Island is part of the Andaman Islands in the Bay of Bengal off the eastern coast of India. It's roughly 5 miles long and 4.5 miles wide, which I'm not really good with math, but gives you an approximately total land area of maybe 23 square miles. Much of the island is heavily forested, and despite trips by explorers to the island long ago, it's remained really poorly surveyed. The Sentinelese people have existed on the island for many, many years. In 1867, following a terrible monsoon season, the Indian merchant vessel, the Nineveh, ran aground on the coral reefs that basically surround all sides of the island. 106 survivors landed on the island, where they were forced to repeatedly fend off attacks by the inhabitants who wanted nothing whatsoever to do with them. The survivors were eventually rescued by the Royal Navy, returning home with horrible tales of battle with the natives. Roughly 10 to 15 years after that, further attempts to contact the Sentinelese people proved largely fruitless. And when an elderly couple and 4 children were actually removed from the island during a trip by the governor Maurice Vidal Portman, the old couple, once they were exposed to the elements off of the island, sickened quickly and died. The 4 kids were quickly returned to the island so that they did not get sick as well. Further trips there largely ceased until after Indian independence. In 1981, the merchant vessel, the MV Primrose, ran aground on those same coral reefs, and the crew, knowing the reputation of the islanders, chose to stay on the ship, which honestly is pretty smart. But then while they were on the ship, started noticing that the islanders were starting to build their own boats. presumably to sail them out and confront the ship's crew. The captain radioed for a cache of weapons to be dropped so they could defend themselves, but that never occurred due to a heavy storm. Fortunately, that same storm prohibited the islanders from launching their makeshift boats, and after a very tense and scary week, stranded aboard the grounded vessel, they were all rescued by a helicopter working for the Indian Oil and Natural Gas Corporation. Now, despite the obvious, and really, you can't get much more obvious than these accounts. Despite the obvious fact that the Sentinelese people do not want outside contact, attempts persisted, and then finally in 1991, Triloknath Pandit, who was the director of the Anthropological Survey of India, and several of his colleagues made the first friendly contact with the Sentinelese people by bringing them coconuts and other gifts. Sometimes you feel like a nut and sometimes you don't, I guess. Throughout the course of several trips over the years between 1991 to 1997, they gained little progress in understanding the inhabitants' language, and communication just basically remained problematic. The Sentinelese people, even though they didn't display open hostility towards Pandit and his team, made it clear that if they overstayed their welcome, all bets were off. Pandit finally stopped visiting the island in 1997 and urged the Indian government to continue to restrict the area around the island. Now, the Indian government first established a no-go zone of 5 nautical miles around the island decades before in 1956, and violators were warned that they could be punished with extensive jail time if they did not respect the law. Pandit's failure to truly communicate meaningfully with the Sentinelese people only underscored the importance of maintaining that no-go zone. In 2004, the Indian earthquake and tsunami rocked the entire region and actually tilted the tectonic plate that is underneath the island, causing it to elevate a further 6 feet approximately out of the ocean. So the island is now taller than it was, and much of the coral reef that surrounds the island was also raised out of the water and exposed to the air. The result of this shift created shallow lagoons and even joined a smaller islet to the main island. The Indian government sent several helicopters to the area to survey the storm damage and inspect conditions on the island, but they were greeted with open hostility, and the islanders shot arrows, threw spears, and rocks at the chopper, which quickly flew away. In 2006, 2 Indian fishermen defied the restricted zone and were fishing illegally in the waters near the island when their boat was picked up on a current and carried closer to the island. They were promptly killed by the Sentinelese people. The Indian government has repeatedly stated that they will not prosecute the islanders for killing unwanted visitors. So, again, do you really need a precaution to not go there? But, of course, that's exactly what happened in 2018 when John Allen Chow, a Christian missionary who apparently decided to test the theory of an afterlife, convinced 7 Indian nationals to help him visit the island because, nothing says I respect your culture and boundaries like telling you that you need to find Jesus and being force-fed Christianity and its dogma. Anyway, surprise, surprise, the islanders killed Chow shortly after he landed by shooting him full of arrows and then dragging his body away, never to be seen again. I mean, hopefully they buried it, but who knows? It was never recovered. And now at last, we come to the star of this episode, a 24-year-old YouTuber from Scottsdale, Arizona named Mikhailo Viktorovich Polyakov. Polyakov, who runs a YouTube channel dedicated to dangerous travel adventures, decided that it would be a nifty stunt if he could get to the island and shoot some videos of himself interacting with the islanders. And for some bizarre reason, he thought that bringing a can of Diet Coke would be just the ticket to winning over the hearts and minds of the Sentinelese people. And as those of us who love good luxury meal know, nothing goes with a Diet Coke quite like a bunch of coconuts, which is what he brought with him. That's what he left in addition to the can of Diet Coke. Now, in spite of this obviously overwhelming display of generosity and foolishness, Polyakov failed to meet any of the Sentinelese Islanders, which frankly is probably a good thing for old Polyakov's health, considering the fates of the 3 individuals who broke the law and traveled there before him. Now, Polyakov apparently gave up after blowing a whistle and trying to get the Islanders' attention. Then he took some sand from the island and filmed some videos from the boat he had traveled there on. He had basically taken off from South Sentinel Island in a rubber dinghy and journeyed north. He was subsequently arrested for a violation of Indian laws and is currently being held in a detention facility. I hope the judge orders a psychiatric evaluation as well, because it's really crazy to think that visiting some remote, strange island that is prohibited to outsiders was a good idea. If he's convicted, Polyakov could face up to 8 years in prison. This isn't the first stupid thing Polyakov has done. He's also traveled to Afghanistan and palled around with Taliban members brandishing guns and swords. You know, those big swords that they use to cut the heads off of people. This is the first time, however, that he's been held accountable. And I have to be honest here. I don't have any sympathy. None whatsoever. If you think that traveling to some forbidden island to preach the word of your God is a good idea when literally everything and everyone is telling you not to, then you deserve the fate you get. Not only is it remarkably stupid, but it's also a drain on the resources of your government, which now has to try to get your sorry ass back home, often from governments that aren't exactly friendly to American citizens. So hey, missionaries and influencers, maybe, take war zones and forbidden strange islands off the old to-do list. Maybe also respect local laws. Oh, and see if you can dig up some of that good old-fashioned common sense that used to be so prevalent, and yet nowadays has just become so increasingly rare. Otherwise, your attempts to spread the good book around or gain 1 million views on your latest TikTok might just backfire and get you imprisoned or buried in the ground. And that's going to do it for this episode of The Weekly Strange. Be sure to check out our other shows on this channel, like The Other Side of Midnight, where I talk to callers all about their paranormal experiences, and The Hunted, where I delve into the profiles of fugitives that are still on the run from justice. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our uploads. For now, I'm Jon F. Merz, your host. I will see you on Friday with a brand new episode of The Other Side of Midnight, and I will see you next week for new episodes of The Hunted and this show, The Weekly Strange. Have a good night. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.